background, you spent, as you mentioned, in the finance world, but obviously looking at it, it's a lot in the kind of sales, business development, marketing type world. How did you come about, obviously, setting up your own firm in this space?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in investing since I was 18. Opened a nice, I've been investing in equities and crypto more recently. But yeah, with regards to the actual roles I've done, they've been very much at early stage companies, usually as the second hire outside of the US. So I have had a reasonable amount of experience kind of launching a business in new markets. And although it was predominantly on the commercial side, it was very much in the space that we're currently investing in. So some of the founders that we've invested in our first couple of deals are actually guys that I've known for 4 or 5 years and have got relationships with. That's how I've met my partners, Kevin and Kieran, as well. Kevin was a client of mine, and Kieran was his company we did some marketing with back in the day. So yes, slightly different hat, but still very much looking at the same sort of industries. And yeah, with regards to actually launching the venture business, as I say, we about this time last year were kicking around some ideas for different funding models and really addressing that gap in the industry. And we felt that our complementary skill sets would come together nicely to really provide the full package. And so yeah, so far so good.
Over the time of setting up your firm and going through it, what would you have done differently over the last kind of 8 months?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's really just a case of learning by doing, as that's true of any startup or sort of first time founder, I suppose we're playing in a space which has a lot of added complexity with regards to regulation and compliance. And, there are a lot of hoops to jump through. So I could easily give my sort of self a lot of advice, looking back with hindsight. But at the time, actually, would have been very difficult to do anything differently just because, the classic adage of you don't know what you don't know. We're operating on a very global level. A lot of funds tend to be focused on the UK or the US, and therefore, it fits quite neatly into a certain type of tax or a certain legislation. But we've got investors in 30 plus countries. We're investing globally, and so there wasn't really a neat off-the-shelf solution. And without going to a law firm and paying hundreds and hundreds of thousands to create a very bespoke structure, we've had to navigate as best we can the solutions that are on offer and sort of piece together something that actually does work and cater to our needs.
What was it that inspired you to go from investing in what seemed food and beverage companies to then founding your own SaaS company?
Well, there's a trick there. It's as I mentioned before, I've met the path of private equity out of pure luck. My initial background was through medical studies. I've worked in the IT industry years ago through IBM, and I've just happened to have Astorg as a client, and I switched from this IT consultancy to private equity, meaning that I can speak 2 languages there: digital and private equity. And obviously, there's a benefit at the crossing of those 2, and on top, and that wouldn't be possible without knowing within the deepest part of my heart that I love to create, I love to initiate things, to construct and to launch things. And this is exactly what we do as a fintech. And happily enough, we've been selected among the 11 fintech to invest in France this year. And that shows also that there's clear interest of investors within the fintech environments dedicated to the private equity industry. And as a matter of fact, and you imagine that the AMF, the Autorité des Marchés Financiers, is now asking every single GP on the market that is regulated, which tool do you use? And the big thing there is that only 6% of the market is equipped with a solution to manage its fund. Really? So when you add all that up, it was clear that there was something to be done, and we're really happy to tackle that.
Interesting. Well, it sounds like you've seen an opportunity based on the work you've done and pivoted to go and do it. So
we were just lacking a product, and so if the product is not there, we're just creating the product that I would love to have 10 years ago, and that I would love to have 1 year ago. And it's great.
So I'm fascinated to know. So I did a bit of digging on you and found out that obviously you used to be actually in the UK as an NHS service doctor. So thank you very much for the work that you did, no doubt saving plenty of lives. And then you've gone into the investing world. So, tell us about how you've made that transition. I'm sure being a doctor and being an investor are completely different worlds. So how's that come about?
So I started off my career at the NHS, and I think like every doctor, I just wanted to be a consultant, and I wanted to work for the NHS forever. But getting into the job, I realized two things. Number one, the time that I had was only limited. The impact that I could make was really limited to the amount of patients I could see in a day. And no matter how hard you work, even if you're seeing patients 24 hours a day, you can only make a certain amount of impact in clinical practice. And that impact, I don't want to sort of diminish it in any way. It's amazing work. And doctors are, particularly in the NHS environment, it's the most sophisticated healthcare organization in the world in terms of delivering value for patients free at the point of receiving that treatment. It's an amazing organization. It's an organization that sets an example for the world in the way that healthcare should be run. But I felt like I wanted to sort of make more impact than I could do in clinical practice. In terms of, I can't see 1 million patients in a day. I can't see 1,000 patients in a day. But I wanted to try and maybe make more is the wrong term actually, but make a different kind of impact where I could build something that could perhaps make more impact than I could make on my own. And that wasn't something that was available to me in clinical practice. So I started thinking about what I could do. When I was in medical school, my youngest sister actually died in Nigeria. And she died because of reasons that could easily sort of have been diagnosed and treated in the UK. And one of my initial thoughts when struggling with this transition was, it would have been such an easy, straightforward pathway to follow in the UK, but in Nigeria and in most parts of Africa, there are so many preventable deaths because of the lack of services and the lack of financing in our healthcare system. And I felt that sense of inequality and that lack of justice was kind of devastating for me. So I decided to start a business here in Nigeria, which I did. We started a medical transportation company and expanded that into a full service medical company. But even running that sort of highlighted to me this need for additional financing from the infrastructure side, from the private equity side, and from the technology side of healthcare in Africa. So that made me start thinking more about the power of investment and how catalytic investments made in the right way and channeled in the right direction can be to thousands and millions of people. And that was the kind of impact that I really wanted to make.
You obviously faced quite a few challenges when you were at Blue Wave, when you were at in private equity, that inspired you to start kind of Blue Wave, and you kind of touched a little bit on that. But what were some of the main challenges that you faced that inspired you to start Blue Wave and start this different business venture?
The primary reason that led me to Blue Wave was solving my own problem. And one of the biggest challenges that I faced was that the industry meaningfully matured over time. And when I started 20-something years ago in private equity, we would essentially be able to, buy a company from a business owner directly at a fair price. We would do a couple things to optimize the business, and then we would sell the company in a competitive, efficient process using one of our former investment banker friends. And so it was more about optimization and an arbitrage that was driving returns. And then when I fast forwarded into the kind of the current climate, I was book number 250 in a highly investment bank process that was not only facing private equity firms, but strategic buyers. And if I were frank and honest with myself, when I would win an auction where I beat 250 other bidders, I'd have a heart palpitation. I'd go, dear God, we won. I hope we have the edge that we convinced ourselves that we did. And so it was kind of crazy. And it went from optimization to transformation. And in order to transform a business, that means we had to be very right on the due diligence and even better on the value creation. And what that meant was we had to use lots and lots of very good third parties, because most private equity firms themselves are small businesses. And we're looking at different companies every day. So there's no way you could build all the skill sets that you need internally. And so we're in some ways very kind of amazing general contractors. You have to bring all these different skill sets, and you're going to do the land's different each time, and you're going to sometimes you can build on, sometimes you can't, but what you can build on is different each time. The challenge was because every company was different, every need was different, every third party need was different if we were going to do it right. And then what I would do is you get very expensive MBAers and highly capable people, and we would Google problem in industry and call friends every day and say, do you know someone who does this? And I ran the hourly cost of our team, and it was in the thousands of dollars an hour. And I said, oh my God, we're spending 40, 50, 60 hours a week calling people and Googling. And then I called probably 20 to 30 of my other friends at 20 to 30 other funds. So is this how you do it? I said, yeah, that's how we do it. It's like, this is insane. How can this be the best way to do it? And I said, well, there's nothing else there for it. We can't build it in. So I tried to build what Blue Wave was internally in the fund. And the challenge was we didn't have enough volume because these were long tails of episodic needs. And so then it struck me, it's like, well, if we were able to build something as kind of like a central magic toolbox, it would solve the problem for everyone in a way that's also supportive of the industry, because these are the tactics. Right? If we stick with the building analogy, I felt like I was the architect, I was the developer, but I needed to know who the right tile person was, or the landscaper, or the pool person, et cetera. But I didn't care if other people used that person too, because it was really my grand plan and my architecture that mattered. And so it was this idea that if we could make the world a smaller place, it would be a huge benefit to the private equity firms, but also to the service providers. And one of the stories that struck me when I first did this was, or when I was thinking about it, was one of my friends who was a service provider called me and said, Sean, you're on fire all the time, and I sell fire extinguishers, but you're too busy to put yourself out unless I call you at the exact same time you're on fire, and my fire extinguisher puts out the one that's literally burning your ankles at the time. Otherwise, you won't ever pick up my phone. And I thought about it, it's like, you're right, because I've got 100 fires around me at every one time. It's not that I don't want to know you. It's just I've got a triage, or my shoes are burning right now. So this idea that you could understand this universe and bring really good together with really good at the exact time they know each other in an excellent way. And I go, wow, that solves my problem.
So looking at Inside Equity, what was it that drove you to set that up with your partner and build that business?
Well, I think anyone that's been involved in management consulting for quite some time, which he had been, and I had been a little bit less so, but also in investment banking, those are advisory or transactional type activities, which are great. And some people are gifted at it, and that's what they're born to do. But I think a lot of us want to be on the buy side, so we actually have control over the investments, where we are actually making the decisions. We want to be in the act of making the decisions that guide companies, and then bearing the fruits of those decisions. And so it wasn't hard at all to go from consulting to private equity, because I was growing a little bit weary of just advising clients on what to do. And sometimes they would do it and sometimes they wouldn't, which was really frustrating when they wouldn't do the right answer because it was too hard, or they just didn't like the decision emotionally, even though it was the correct thing. So it's really easy to go into the buy side, and then being on the line sometimes. I've been interim CEO, I think, of 3 of our companies, and sometimes that was necessary. But that's something I often relished, because then I was able to immediately impact the companies and hopefully get them on the right trajectory.